Welcome back. This is part 2 of the speech basics presentation, and the last one we talked a little bit about speech anxiety and how common it is and how severe it is, that it's, for some people, literally the idea of giving a speech is more terrifying than death. And then I understand that this is a very common fear, and I'm teaching you something that you may not be very comfortable with to start. And in your discussion boards, that's very evident that a lot of you are afraid of it. And we talked a little bit about some of the history of speech giving. I only really focused on ancient Greece because if we were to go through the history of every important speech in human history, well, that would not only take an entire semester, that would be an entire degree, and maybe not even something that could be accomplished in a lifetime. Even just the most important speeches of ancient Rome, for instance, is something you could develop an entire course on. But you can pretty much be assured that behind every major event in human history, there's a speech that probably started it somewhere. So this is how change happens. This is how we communicate ideas. This is how we convince people of things. That really is an important skill, not just for, major things, major rhetoric, like presidential speeches, but even something small, like convincing your friends where to go to dinner. And we talked about the rhetorical situation, the purpose, the speaker, the audience, and the reason the speech is being given, the excidents. So that brings us to where we left off, which is speech structure. And we're going to talk about some basics of how to approach speeches and kind of the parts of them to help make it a little easier for you to compose these. So all formal speeches should have a goal or a purpose. There should be a central idea that it revolves around. It might be something you're teaching, it might be something that you're informing someone of, or the goal might be to persuade someone of something, that pie and tea that we talked about. But there should be a very clear goal or purpose that the entire speech is focused around. In this class, you'll be given a list of prompts for most assignments to help you create your purpose and goal statement. The two exceptions to that are the demonstrative speech and the informative speech. With the demonstrative speech, I don't tend to give you specific topics because I don't know what talent you have that you could teach me about, and I like learning new things. So I kind of leave it up to you to choose something that you're really good at. And kind of a similar thing with the informative speech. There are so many things out there you can be interested in. And so I kind of leave it up to you to teach me about something that's important to you, so that I'm not just giving you a list of topics that you might not be interested in. In the other speeches, I'll probably give you a prompt or something to work from, especially because with those, often the appropriate topics for that type of speech are a little more limited than in the demonstrative and in the informative. So components of strong speeches. So like an essay, a speech has 3 main parts, right? So it has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And within those main sections are kind of some subsections and guidelines that make speeches a lot easier to write and make it more likely that your audience will listen to what you have to say, especially if they're in the places where the audience expects them. Because then if it's not in the right place, then the audience might be going, well, where's she going with this? What's the point of this? So putting things in the right places makes the audience kind of more likely to understand where you're going with it, and to help them pay attention and actually pay attention to what you're saying in the speech rather than the fact that you seem like you're going off script. So the introduction is normally the first 10% of the speech. It starts with an attention getter, which is called a hook in essay writing. So the attention getter, it can be an anecdote, it can be a startling quote, it can be an interesting piece of information. It's really anything that just draws your reader or your audience in, and gets them interested in what you have to say. Then you integrate an audience relevance statement that tells the audience why they should listen to you, why this matters to them, or what they can learn or gain. So this is a statement of some kind that tells the audience why they should listen to your speech. And it helps to continue what you started with the attention getter, getting their attention, hooking them, getting them to listen to you. And then from there, you have a goal or a purpose statement that outlines the main purpose of the speech. And often, especially in longer speeches, the introduction ends in a thesis statement. Now, sometimes, especially, and it looks like it cut off here, especially in short speeches, the audience relevance statement, the goal statement, and the thesis will all be combined into one. Because, if it's only 10% and you spend, let's say you have a 3 minutes or a 1 minute speech. A 1 minute speech is going to be about 150 words. Well, if you spend half a page, which is 150 words on your introduction, then you have no more speech. So sometimes in those shorter speeches, you have to kind of combine elements, but I'll know when you're doing that. As long as, you somehow are getting the audience's attention, you're explaining why it matters to them and the main purpose of the speech, then it'll more than likely fit the criteria that I'm looking for, especially in early speeches. In later speeches, we may want to go more toward a 3-part thesis format where we have more time to work with and you can kind of outline your main points. Come on, computer. It seems like it's frozen up. 1 second. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. Excuse me. But it's not letting me go to the controls, and it's not letting me move forward. It's not letting me do anything. Okay. So we'll just do it this way for now. I apologize about that technical glitch. They sometimes do happen to me too. So in the body, which is normally about 85% of your speech, you'll explore the main points needed to support your goal or purpose statement or your thesis statement. It is normally 1 to 3 paragraphs for a short speech, although this obviously does change depending on the speech. Sometimes it'll work better to have 2 body paragraphs, sometimes it'll work better to have 5. It just depends on your topic and what's needed to organize them. You do want 1 paragraph per main point. Same as in an essay, paragraphs are kind of thoughts. They're thoughts grouped together. A switch in paragraph tells the reader or the audience that you're having a change in thought. So you generally do want to separate your main points into paragraphs. And then the individual paragraph should start with a topic sentence that states the purpose of the paragraph and end with a transition sentence that explains why the paragraph was important and how it relates back to the thesis or the goal statement. Transition statements are a misleading term. The goal there isn't to create a bridge between the 2 paragraphs. It's more to tie a bow on what you just said and prepare the reader for the next paragraph. And again, you should do this topic and transition thing with every main point, which is a paragraph in your speeches. And that's also essay writing, but it applies also to speeches. Okay, so the conclusion is normally about 5% of your speech. In it, you will restate your thesis, summarize your main points, and end with a clincher. Conclusions are the hardest and easiest part of an essay or a speech to write. Most of the conclusion is repeating what you've already said. So you're kind of paraphrasing your thesis to remind your audience of what it was that was your main point, because by now, you've had 3 paragraphs where you've been talking about sub-points, but they haven't heard the main point in a while. And you want to summarize the main points and how those relate back to the thesis to remind the reader of the main things you said, or the audience of the main things that you said, so that they have those fresh in their mind. And the only really new part of the conclusion is the clincher, which is a powerful image or a call to action that helps the audience remember your speech. It can also be a rhetorical question or something like that. It's anything that really solidifies that last moment in the audience's. You can tell I normally teach composition in the reader's audience's mind, so that they remember what you've said. And as I said, it's the only really new part of the conclusion, and that really trips a lot of people up. They feel like they're not supposed to repeat what they've said, but actually you are. Not word for word, obviously, but you are supposed to summarize it, to remind the audience of the main things that you've said and kind of prepare them for everything to end. So there is nothing wrong with kind of repeating the context and the content of what you've said earlier just only in the conclusion. So a rough outline for most, but not all, speeches is that you start with the introduction, which starts with an attention getter, then move to the audience relevance statement, then if needed, the goal or purpose statement, and then end it with a thesis statement. And as I said before, in some speeches, you'll kind of be combining audience relevance, goal, purpose, and thesis into one. In your body paragraphs, generally about 3-ish, there's a topic sentence, then the exposition, which is the middle part of the paragraph. It's everything from the topic to the transition sentence. And then you end with a transition sentence. And in the conclusion, you paraphrase your thesis, summarize your main points, and end on the clincher. So the main types of speeches, there are really about 4, and these relate back to the pie and tea thing I was talking about before. Informative is a speech that has the intention of educating the audience on a particular topic. They often rely on logic to captivate the audience. They make complex information easier to understand or offer a different view. A demonstrative speech, also known as a demonstration speech or a how-to speech, or a process analysis speech, there's a lot of terms for it, are very similar to, they're actually a type of informative speech, but they focus on how to do something or how to work. So they focus on the process rather than the concepts. Commercials, training sessions, those are all popular demonstrative speeches. A lot of YouTube videos, if you look up how to in YouTube and something pops up, it's probably a demonstrative speech. Persuasive speech is a speech that works to convince people to change something in the way they think, do, or to start doing something they're not currently doing. So it's a why I'm right speech. Here's why my point of view is valid, and here's why you should do what I'm telling you to do. And then entertaining, the speaker provides pleasure and enjoyment that make the audience laugh or identify with anecdotal information. It is not stand-up comedy exactly, but it is very similar to stand-up comedy. There has to be a goal or a moral for it to be considered a speech, not just entertainment. But a lot of stand-up comics will actually have a kind of a goal statement in there, and if they do, then in that case it probably would be. But we're not focusing on entertainment in this class, although maybe some of you could apply what you learn here to make your humorous speeches more humorous. So the main types of speeches in this class that we're actually going to focus on are the narrative, which is a speech that tells a story, normally about the speaker. A demonstrative, the how-to speeches I was talking about that teach the audience how to do something. I'm probably going to ask that we focus on teaching the audience how to do something rather than how something works, because how something works ends up getting really close to informative, and that can be really confusing for a lot of students. Informative speeches educate an audience on a topic. They attempt to be unbiased. Persuasive speeches attempt to convince the audience of a specific point of view, and although they do attempt to be objective, there is a much clearer bias or purpose in them. There are a couple of other speeches that aren't on that list, the group presentation and the career development mock interview. Those are still types of speeches, but they're different, so we're not putting them in this kind of category. Speech types differ based on audience and exigence, but the basic structure of a speech always pretty much remains the same. It's what we've talked about before. So we're going to stop here, and then we'll come back and do delivery in a minute, and I'll see you in just a few. Let's see if I can get this to work well enough to stop.